the new intakes for being chosen through their own merits and urged them to keep up the momentum.
On behalf of the university's chancellor and founder, His Excellency Sir Professor Dr. Alhaji Yahya A.J.J. Jammeh, the chairman and members of the governing council, the Senate, the faculty and staff, and your fellow continuing students, both undergraduate and graduate, I again warmly welcome you here at this University of the Gambia.
In what can be described as a marathon speech, Vice Chancellor Carr recognized the presence of visiting students on an exchange program and partners from various colleges and universities in the U.S. Professor Carr disclosed that the 2016 class came at a time when the Science, Technology and Innovation Park in Faraba opened its doors to science students and researchers. That edifice, he said, serves as a hub for the development of the much-needed science human capacity and capability of the country. For Grts News, this is Babukar Senghor.
Well, we'll be back with news from outside the Gambia after this break. Stay tuned then. Welcome back to GRTS News. The United States has recognized the government of Somalia the first time since 1991. The move comes during a visit to Washington by the Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud. And Charles Blake Goudet has been arrested in Ghana after being in exile for more than a year. The former leader of the Young Patriots did not have a political refugee status, and he has been on the run since the ousting of Laurent Gbagbo. We have details of those and other stories in the CFI report.
For the first time in over 20 years, a Somali president visited Washington on Thursday.
I am delighted to announce that for the first time since 1991, the United States is recognizing the government of Somalia.
With new political recognition, Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud may now be able to count on financial aid from the United States to help reconstruct his country that has been ravaged by decades of war. The trial against former Rwandan politician Leon Mugesera opened in Kigali on Thursday after it was postponed several times. The first hearing mainly focuses on an anti-Tutsi speech Mugesera made in 1992 during a rally for his party. His violent speech is considered a key element in starting the 1994 genocide that left at least 800,000 people dead. Leon Mugesera had lived for several years with his family in Canada before being extradited in January 2012. Charles Blake Goudet has been arrested in Ghana. He is a staunch supporter of former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo. The former leader of the Young Patriots lived in exile for over a year and a half. He was arrested in Ghana's capital Accra on Thursday and is now being detained by Ghanaian police. Charles Blake Goudet does not have political refugee status. The Ivorian authorities issued an arrest warrant for him over his involvement in the post-electoral crisis in Côte d'Ivoire in December 2010, in which nearly 3,000 people died. The Democratic Republic of Congo held a commemoration ceremony in honor of Patrice Lumumba, who was assassinated in 1952. Lumumba was the hero of independence and the country's first prime minister. The head of state and several government officials attended the ceremony. Over half a century after Lumumba was assassinated, Belgian authorities have decided to reopen an investigation into his death. Patrice Lumumba's family called the move a courageous initiative.
After deploying 1,400 troops to Mali, France says it plans to send in more soldiers, targeting a total number of 2,500 personnel. Meanwhile, West African troops have started arriving in the country, where Islamist and Tuareg rebels have been holding sway. 2,000 African troops taking part in the international mission to support Mali are expected to be on the ground by January the 26th.
After the French intervention in Mali, West African troops have started to arrive in Bamako. The first of the Nigerian and Togolese contingents, who arrived on Thursday, will provide logistical support. 2,000 African troops taking part in MISMA, the international mission to support Mali, are expected to be on the ground by January 26th. They will be billeted in several villages a few hundred kilometers north of the capital.
This is the first batch of the Nigerian contingent. We're expecting many more within the week, and hopefully by the end of before the end of next week, most of the contingents, if not all, will be on ground.
What you see here is not everything. Some of these teams are here, you could say, in order to prepare the terrain for the deployment later of a much larger contingent.
MISMA forces were originally not expected to begin operation until autumn, but the calendar has been moved up, and ECOWAS countries are hastening their deployment of troops. Burkina Faso, Senegal, and Niger have promised 500 men, Benin 300, and Ghana 120. Chad has said it would send 2,000 soldiers, a valuable asset, since these troops are experienced in desert combat. With 900 troops, Nigeria has the largest contingent in ECOWAS, making a grand total of some 5,000.
The jihadists are heavily armed, but we believe that they've been weakened by the French offensive. And with training that we've received, we're sure to be efficient on the ground.
Meanwhile, France continues its buildup of forces. After intervening initially with airstrikes to try to halt the rapid advance of the Islamists, France sent in ground troops and has said that it intends to boost its troop numbers from 1,400 to 2,500.
Well, time now to take another break. When we come back, we'll take a look at sports. Stay tuned in. Welcome back. Time now to join Famara Fofana for a look at the sports news. Famara, I guess it's all about the African Cup of Nations.
You're right, Fatu. And as expected, South Africa will play host to the Africa Cup of Nations starting tomorrow, Saturday. And 2 years after the hosting of the World Cup in the Rainbow Nation, the mood ahead of this year's Continental Championship is a far cry from the euphoria that greeted the World Cup. The AFCON does not seem to be attracting much attention despite reasonable ticket prices. Let's turn on to this report for more on that situation.
To run into the 2013 Africa Cup of Nations, you have to go all the way to the stadium. Berg is preparing for the games very discreetly. Nothing to do with the 2010 World Cup, also held here in South Africa.
I was also a producer during the World Cup. Obviously it was a much bigger event because it was an international event. But this one is just as special. I mean, it's an African, only African countries are competing in the tournament. But you know, it's none is better. I mean, you know, this one is just an African.
The event does not seem to be drawing huge crowds. Ticket sales are not great despite affordable prices. The tourism office in Johannesburg is going out of its way to market the city's image.
We went around telling the whole world through advertising and through visiting the African continent, talking about Johannesburg and what Johannesburg has to offer.
Maybe that wasn't enough. Ken Craigton is still waiting. He runs a guest house in a Joburg suburb. During the World Cup games he had no vacancies. For AFCON, bookings are yet to come.
I think also because of the fact that they had two AFCON Cups very close to each other, that maybe the uniqueness of the event wasn't as big.
This AFCON is being held only 1 year after the previous one. The Confederation is switching to odd-numbered years to avoid competition with other international events.
The marketing side of things hasn't been too strong. I think it could have been a lot better. It's unfortunate that that maybe they had limited resources as well as also short notice to be able to really build up the interest.